You've decided to purchase a property, and the next step is after making the offer is you got to put a deposit down on that property. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about exactly what that means and how it affects you as a buyer during your purchase. I'm Brad Chisholm with eXp Realty here in Saskatoon, and today we're going to talk about what a deposit is, what it isn't, and how it affects you as the buyer, and how it can affect the seller during a real estate transaction.
So I'll read this paragraph first as a definition, as a starting point, and then we'll get into each point sentence by sentence or line by line here. As part of the purchase price, buyers provide a deposit as an act of good faith. It is held in a trust account established specifically for this purpose. Deposits are forfeitable if the buyer defaults on the transaction after all the conditions have been removed. There is no legal requirement regarding the amount of the deposit, but typically, as a property value increases, so does the amount of the deposit. It is held in a trust account established specifically for this purpose. So here in Saskatchewan where I work, typically it's going to be held by the buyer's brokerage, the buyer's agent's brokerage. So I work for eXp Realty. It's going to be held by eXp Realty's trust account that is specifically set aside for the purchase of this property. Sometimes in other locations, it might be the seller's brokerage that holds the deposit money. I've worked with builders where the builders will hold the deposit money. It doesn't really matter because that money is, as we'll get into, it's going to be returnable if the deal doesn't proceed. But it's held specifically by that trust account for the purpose of purchasing that property. It's not held by your realtor. It's not held by the lawyers. It's in our brokerage account set aside for that purpose. Deposits are forfeitable if the buyers default on the transaction after all the conditions are removed. So what that means is that prior to removing conditions, that deposit is completely returnable and refundable to the buyers. So for example, if you've got conditions on your offer, usually it's a financing condition to make sure that the financing is going to be there, and a property inspection to make sure that the property is okay. If you get to a point where the bank says, hey, we can't lend on this property, or the inspection turns up something that makes you uncomfortable, you can totally back out and you get your deposit returned. If, however, you've removed the financing condition, the bank says, yep, we'll finance it. You've removed your inspection condition, everything looked good with the house, and then a week later, or 2 weeks later, or 2 days before possession, you say, no, we're not going to proceed. Something comes up, life happens, who knows what's going on, but you need to back out of the deal. In that instance, that deposit is going to be forfeitable to the sellers. And what that's for is that it compensates the sellers for the time that they've missed being able to market their property. If there's a month between the conditions being removed and the possession date, they've missed out on that month. They could market it to other potential buyers and sell their house and move on. So that deposit could be forfeitable if you've removed conditions and then you don't proceed with the sale. There is no legal requirement regarding the amount of the deposit, but typically as the property value increases, so does the amount of the deposit. There isn't a set amount that you have to put down 3% or 5% or 10% of the purchase price. That's not a hard and fast rule here. But typically on a single family house that's, say, $500,000, you're going to be looking at sort of $10,000-ish as a deposit. Again, that's completely negotiable. There isn't a set amount. You could say, I'm going to put down $5 deposit in your offer. The seller might not accept that because they're not protected by something like a $10,000 deposit.
So to summarize the deposits, when you're making an offer on a residential property, or any property for that matter, on a residential property, it's expected that you put down some money in good faith for the sellers. That money is held in the buyer's brokerage trust account for the express use to the purchase of that particular property. If you proceed with the purchase, that money goes towards that purchase. If you decide to back out before your conditions are removed, then you get all that money back. There isn't a set amount that you need to put down as a deposit, but typically as the purchase price increases, so does the deposit. If you have any other questions about deposits or anything else regarding residential or multifamily residential real estate, give me a shout.